Can you guys all join me and give a huge round of applause to Evan and bring him up to the stage?
Thanks a ton, right?
That bad boy up.
There we go. Thank you, Rod.
Absolutely. Welcome back to Bitcoin Park.
Yeah, it's awesome to be back. It's great. It's just awesome to be back in Nashville, because the last time, which was my first time when I was here a couple of months ago, this place left an impression. I mean, apart from the fact that you guys took me into that ice.
Oh man. Okay.
Thing. What did you guys call that?
We're gonna quick tangent here. So, anyone into cold plunges? All right.
I don't even know what to tell you about cold plunges right now, but anyway.
You don't do cold plunges in Zimbabwe?
Dude, are you kidding me? Like, there's just no time for cold plunges. Like, how much more pain can you take, right?
It was, Evan's such a good sport. I'm like, hey, Evan, and another friend, and a couple of us in this room. I was like, after we hosted the Global Bitcoin Summit in partnership with one of our great partners, the Human Rights Foundation, Evan had some time left over in Nashville, and I said, hey, you want to come cold plunge with us? He's like, I don't know what you were talking about, but I'm in. Let's do it. And then we got in, and I'm just like, dude, you're about to see. You know, but it was pretty intense. But
I know it was. My soul left my body for a couple of minutes in that place. So yeah, but it was really cool. I'll do it again in the next life.
I feel you. Now, a lot of these folks, show of hands, do you guys, who knows Evan's story, out of curiosity? Okay, only a few folks, which is great. Okay. You're such an incredible person, but maybe I want to give you the floor for a little bit just to share your story, and then maybe we can dovetail into Bitcoin, while you're kind of on this mission, and then we'll talk about the book here in a bit.
Awesome, thanks, Rod. And I mean, just jump in whenever I could keep talking. I'm a charismatic pastor, and I'm an African, so we could be talking for a long time here. So feel free to jump in. So I am originally from Zimbabwe, small country that's in the southern part of Africa, just above South Africa. And my story this particular story kind of begins in 2016. And you'll see some of the places where the kind of, where the collision with Bitcoin begins to happen. It's much later, obviously, but you might start to see where the interest for me and for people that are kind of in the human rights space and freedom tech space is. So in 2016 in Zimbabwe, I'm sitting in my small church office, and I was pastoring a church of about 40 people at the time. And Zimbabwe starts to go through another economic collapse. Now, this is maybe our third or fourth economic collapse, and I want to give you context of what I mean by economic collapse, because I think we might be in different worlds when we speak about an economy crashing. The biggest economic collapse in Zimbabwe was in 2008. We had two more prior to that, but 2008 was possibly the most shocking one. And our inflation in Zimbabwe in 2008, at its peak, is conservatively estimated today to have been at 286 million% per year.
Hold on, let me do the math here.
Okay.
Come again?
So it's 286 million% per year.
So how do you buy goods? How do you live life?
And I think that's the best way to kind of calculate, because you don't even waste your time trying to do the calculation. To give you an idea of how bad it was, the largest banknote we had in Zimbabwe during that time was a $100 trillion note. Okay, and I actually brought it. I left it in the hotel room when I came rushing over to, because Bitcoin
it's not
Park
worth
is
much,
really
so don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's not worth a lot. It's worth more to see it than to. But it's a 100. You could Google it and you could see it. But it's $100 trillion note. That's 1 and then 14 zeros after that. And in fact, the story behind it is that it was actually 17 zeros, but the government slashed 3 of the zeros off of that simply because it was too long to fit on the note. So they made an announcement. They said, we won't include the other 3 zeros, but everyone knows, you all know how much it is. We will call it $100 trillion. But it was actually kind of like a $1 quadrillion note. That's what it actually was. And maybe to help you kind of understand, well, like, what does that even buy? You were in 2008 with $100 trillion. There was a time, because you couldn't use it at the same value the whole time. It was losing value really fast. So there was a time you could buy 2 loaves of bread with $100 trillion note. But on a particular day that I actually went to look for bread, and this is what happens in a hyperinflationary environment. In fact, Zimbabwe was not hyperinflationary. I like to call it super hyperinflationary, because it was like that. Part of what happens is that goods that are sold in stores go missing. Everything is for sale. Everyone is buying anything they can find, because what you're trying to do is to store your value as quickly as you can. So you buy anything that you find in a supermarket or in a hardware store. If you find 5 bags of steel nails, even if you don't need them, you're going to buy them, because you need to hold a store, the store of the value of your money. And there was a day that there was bread available at a bakery, and they were selling by the batch, and I found out the bread was there, so I rushed over there, and the line was kind of 2 hours wrapping around the block to get, because everyone was swarming to go and get some bread. And by the time it was my turn to buy, which is about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours later, my $100 trillion, which I hoped to get 2 loaves, 2 hours later, I could only get half a loaf of bread. So the money was losing value by the hour. I'll give you another example. My folks retired many years earlier. My dad's late now, but at the time, my dad had been retired, and him and my mom had put away about $80,000 as savings, which in Zimbabwe, and for the part of Zimbabwe where they lived, it's quite a bit of money to retire on. In the 7 day of supercharged hyperinflation that we had in Zimbabwe, the government actually banned any withdrawals from the bank. So you were not allowed to withdraw any money from the bank. You could deposit if you wanted to, but you were not allowed to make any withdrawals. And within a 7 day period, my parents went from having $80,000 in the bank, and I kid you not, to 25 cents left in a 7 day period. They lost everything. But this is a family that had kind of a means of earning. There were people that were earning far less, that had nothing, and went, and lost even the little that they had. So this is what Zimbabwe had gone through, and so we had scrapped the currency that we had because it was useless, and everyone's bank accounts were zeroed. So in other words, the government just announced and said, "Hey, we have lost all your money, and there's just no other way for us to get it back. So we're just going to zero everyone's bank account, and you guys are just going to have to start again." And it was the hardest thing to go through and not be able to do anything about it. You have to understand how difficult it is for you to lose your life's earnings, to lose everything you have worked for, and then just be told, "Whoops, let's just start again," because it's no one's fault, right? But and I'm sure we'll talk about the reasons why that happened a little bit later on. But part of it was the fear. People were afraid to challenge the president who was in power at the time. Robert Mugabe had been in power since 1980. This is 2008. And then, of course, even by 2016, which is almost 36 years later, he'd still been in power. He'd refused to leave office when he lost the election the one time. And to punish people who had voted against him after he refused to leave office, he went into the areas that voted the most against him and gave people the option to choose a punishment of what they called long sleeve, short sleeve. And that's where you choose where your arm is chopped off either at the wrist or at the elbow. the reason for that was to remind you and those around you when the next election came that with your remaining arm you must put that X in the right place. So this is the level of brutality that Zimbabweans had faced, and that's just one aspect of it. There's much deeper aspect. So let's fast forward back to 2016. I'm sitting in my small church office, and we're going through a second or maybe a third round of inflation again in Zimbabwe. The difference for me at this time in 2016 is that in 2008, my wife and I had no children. It was just her and I. But in 2016, we now have a 5-year-old, we have a 3-year-old, and we have a third one on the way. So this is a whole different ball game for me in terms of putting food on the table. Money's losing value. We had scrapped the currency in 2008. And we had used US dollars all the way until 2016, until all of that money was going missing. So everything we were banking in our banks, the government was taking all of that. And so they then said, hey, guess what? Banks no longer have US dollars. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to print a new currency. And here's the deal is, it's an agreement between you and us that is going to be worth the same 1-to-1 with the US dollars that you guys banked. The problem is that it was backed by absolutely nothing. So we knew since from the 2008 experience that we're going through a second round of this thing. Like it's literally happening again before our eyes. And so I'm sitting in my small church office and I prop my phone up against my Bible and really vent a frustration just out of my own anger as a father, as a husband. And then, of course, as a pastor who's having to look after a church of people who are also going through the same thing, and an orphanage that we look after down the road that was depending on our donations, and now they have nothing. And I just, for 4 minutes, I just let loose into this recording where I'm just pouring my heart out and saying, look, when are we going to say something about this? When is someone going to do something? Like, we all know it's wrong, right? And so when are we going to say it's enough? Like, there's a generation that has to draw a line in the sand and say, the abuse that happened to my grandfather and to my father and to me cannot happen to my children. And so that was what that little video was. And in it, I said to Zimbabweans, look, we have to make a decision. If we cannot, we don't have the right to complain about things we're not willing to participate in changing, because the complaining doesn't change things. We've got to figure out a way to do this. So you and I need to step up. So that's the little video that sets things in motion. That goes viral beyond anything that I had expected, and sets us on this journey that leads me and my family and many other people through things that were equally horrific, but as they were extremely exciting and just extraordinarily amazing to see.
Yeah. And we're going to get into all of those. I'm at a loss for words because I'm feeling a bunch of different emotions for you from telling that story: anger, frustration, and also thinking, wow, could this happen to me here? Right. And I think you're right. There's like two different worlds where, in the US, we look, I'll talk about Bitcoin for a second. It's like we look at that as more of a savings and an investment, where in your case, you're looking at it as like a freedom tool to liberate yourself outside of any of these whoops, we made a mistake type of scenarios. But just to continue going, this is 2016. You're frustrated. You're trying to figure out what you can do. You let it out in this 4-minute video, and your kind of life just changed for whether, I would say now sitting today, which you would probably put at a low probability of being able to sit here today and talk about this story, but for the better of yourself, your family, and as well as all Zimbabweans. Could you take us from that video now up until what happened, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit more.
Okay. I think that there's a a deep desire for most people to kind of escape these kind of situations in Zimbabwe, right? But not everybody can leave. Not everybody can run from it. And that's why, for me, the importance of finding these tools, and I'm just kind of piggybacking on what you said, these tools that help people who, if you can't physically get out of it, how do you survive in it, right? How do you keep your money safe, your wealth safe? How do you just keep yourself at least with a sense of dignity? Because at the end of the day, this is what you get robbed of. It's not really the money, it's your sense of dignity. It's your sense of being a human being who's worth something, who's worth the respect and the privacy that they deserve for certain things. And when someone starts to kind of randomly take your wealth, or take your money, or take your health, or take your that starts to kind of diminish, who you, even in your own eyes, you start to see yourself as, as less of a human being, or less purposeful, in a way, when that has happened to you multiple times. So this video goes out, and it goes viral, and people start talking about, hey man, this guy is starting a revolution. And I'm sitting there, I'm reading these comments. I'm like, this guy's starting a revolution. I'm like,
who, me?
And I'm thinking, no. I am not starting a revolution. There's a bit of a funny moment in this, is that when the video goes out and it goes viral and it's beyond what I expected, and people are having these conversations about, he's starting a revolution, and we should get behind him and so forth, I freak out, and I'm scared. I'm trying to get out of it. And so a friend of mine, such a funny story, but it really taught us something. This friend of mine, he's a communications specialist. He calls me up. He says, dude, I've just seen your video. What's the deal? And I'm like, the deal is I'm trying to get out of this. Like, I don't know. I don't even want to do this. And he says, okay, that's easy. Here's what we do is, why don't we clarify what you were saying and what you were not saying? So let's make these two messages very separate so that the government doesn't come after you. So I'm like, great, let's do it. So we make this video, and it's a second video in which I'm explaining I wasn't saying we are going to overthrow the government. I wasn't, saying that they have failed. But then I do make it very clear that what I was saying is that we're tired of the injustice, we're tired of the corruption, we're tired of the poverty in Zimbabwe. And so we send that out. And that second video goes viral even more than the first one. So I say to my buddy James, dude, what the heck? And he goes, listen, don't worry. This is easy to fix. What we're going to do is we're going to make a third video.
It's going to be perfect. We're going to announce you're running for president. And it's going to be perfect. Oh,
my God. So we make the third video trying to explain what I wasn't saying in the first video and what I wasn't saying in the second video. And we put it out. And that goes even more viral than, and he comes back, he goes, dude, I know exactly what we're doing. I'm like, James, no, this is.
And real quick, and so, by the way, we may take it for granted in the States and some other places, you can just go and protest out in the streets at any point in time. You can protest in a number of ways. Don't you have to get, in Zimbabwe, you have to go get a permit and permission from the government to protest?
The weird thing is that the Constitution gives us the right to protest government, but the police have a law that they have kept from the 1960s, which prohibits people from gathering for political reasons or for protesting, but in particular protesting the government without permission from the government to do so, which is
makes a lot of sense.
I know, makes a ton of sense, right? So there's no, and I mean, even at this point, there's no real kind of desire to protest, because you kind of know what happens when you protest in Zimbabwe. But we get to a point where the government is not listening. So long story short, I then lean into these videos because I discover, okay, they're not diminishing, they keep growing. So maybe let's just make more of these things. So I start to make a lot of videos, and I'm making one a day, and eventually and in them all I'm doing is I'm taking everyday issues that Zimbabweans are going through, and I'm just breaking them down into everyday language. So from kind of high-sounding policy language into very simple, kind of understandable language for anyone to understand. This is what's going on. This is what inflation is. This is what causes it. This is what causes poverty. This is what GDP is. This is all of those things, right? And it's all like 3 minutes a video every day. Just it's got to be done in 3 minutes every single day.
By the way, real quick, your background. What you got fellowships from like a number of amazing users. What's your background, real quick?
So this is a really, again, a real weird story. So I found myself at all these really fancy schmancy universities here in the US. And every time I'm there, I'm like, I'm a carrot amongst apples. What am I doing here, right? Because I'm a pastor, right? I didn't go to college, actually. When I left high school, my dad was running a small transport business, and he just said to me, dude, you can either go off to college or you can give me 2 years of your life, learn the trade, and then figure it out from there. So I chose to support my dad instead. Well, support our family. It was because it really was feeding us. And then I did a little trade course in auto electrics back in the day before cars were computerized. And then after that, I got a marketing job. But then I really enjoyed kind of talking to young people at our church. So I left all of that and I went to Bible school. So that's my background. And I've always said this. Where I think I was at Yale or Johns Hopkins or something where I was doing a fellowship. And I'm like, folks, I got to let you know that I'm just a dude. So if you're expecting any... And that's just the way it rolls.
Amazing. So you're learning, really, you have this gift to communicate to the everyday person, and then you're doing these videos. Then you have a pretty profound message, which is, instead of us going into the streets and protesting, what if we did the reverse?
And you know what? That was a moment, again, that was kind of born out of what else can we do, right? So people are starting to ask as these videos come out, so what should we do now, right? I mean, you're telling us all of this stuff, so what do we do? And eventually, after a series of these little micro campaigns we had done, like at one point we had gone on the street and we're collecting signatures for people to sign so that the Minister of Finance should resign. Not that he was going to resign, but it was a way for people to start to learn that there's always something you can do. Right? There's always something. We should never be in a situation where we're like, there's nothing we can do. There's always something we can do. The one time we accidentally challenged the governor of the Reserve Bank to a debate. And if you're wondering how does that happen accidentally, it's a wild thing. But
yeah, Jerry Powell, if you want to come here, we can talk. Dollars, Bitcoin, anytime.
This is the governor actually did this. So he makes an announcement just like that, and he says, hey, we're introducing this new currency, and we promise you it's going to be 1-to-1 with the US dollar.
It's going to be beautiful. I promise.
I wasn't going to go there. I'm not even going there. I'm a visitor in this country. I'm not messing with. I love the USA. Let me just put it that way real quick, right? So he says, hey, if anyone wants to debate me, I'll debate you about it. It won't lose value, and it's going to work, and everyone's going to love it. So my friend and I are sitting in our office, and we're like, hey, let's challenge him to a debate, like we're nobodies, right? And then we're like, and then he's going to say no. He's definitely going to say no. And then we put together a social media campaign, because that's where we have a following. And we tell everybody, they said no, they ignored us, they don't listen to us, they'll never listen to us, he's lying. We send the letter off to his office, and 3 days later, he writes back and he says yes. And we're completely unprepared. Like I'm sitting with my friend Henry, I'm like, what the heck, dude? Now what I don't even know the first thing about monetary policy. I don't know what we're gonna say to the guy. But it turns out that by the time we did this debate, we decided that we wouldn't go it by ourselves, that we would call as ordinary people as we could to come to the debate and let them debate the governor from a lived experience of using money that loses experience. So what we did is we removed this kind of high-sounding debate of monetary policy and just brought it down to the price of eggs. And just brought it down to, hey, I need this for everyday living. Like, how is this going to work? And it was fantastic because we took him to the cleaners. I mean, the whole story is in the book. It was lovely to see.
So now I get the title Crazy Epic Courage, because we're in this crazy period of time where you're just throwing things and they're sticking, Like you're doing this 4-minute video, and then you're like, "Wait, what the heck's viral?" But when you say viral, how many views is this?
So, I mean, I used to, for my discipleship videos, I used to get like 35 views every 8 weeks, which was so amazing. Like you could track if there was one extra view, you knew it. You're like, that's 37. There's 37 views right here, right? But I mean, that first video when it went viral, I posted it at midnight, woke up like 6 hours later, and it was like at 250,000 views.
That's amazing.
And then it just, from then onwards, it just went completely. Even I was just like, there's something wrong with Facebook, or like I don't know why there's.
Yeah, and so you do the video, we do this debate, and then now we. Now we call the streets?
Now we call. So
okay.
This is where we get to now is after the debate, which was highly publicized, which was great, the government still decided they were going to introduce the new currency. And so that's when we decide to go for broke. And we're like, look, guys, if they're not going to listen to us and they're going to do it anyway, then I think you and I have to figure out something to do because we're going to lose it anyway, right? And so the idea was, how do we get them to pay attention or to realize that people are watching and that at some point...
In a peaceful way.
In a peaceful way, of course. And so, we're sitting in our small church office, and I say to this friend of mine, Henry, I'm like, why don't we shut the country down? And he's like how? How are you going to do that?
Well, believe it or not, Henry, we're going to do a 6th video.
Which is actually what happened. So I record this video, which we send out, and in the video, I ask the citizens of Zimbabwe to join me in one act of protest and defiance to the dictatorship, and that is a boycott. I asked as many people as possible to join me for one day during the week to stay at home, to not go to work, not open your business, not take your children to school, not go to the supermarket, not go to the bank, stay at home, stay off the streets, and let's bring the whole thing to a complete standstill.
And how many people stayed home?
About 12 million people stayed at home. Yeah. I have to tell you, I was both hugely excited and I was so terrified at the same time. I remember thinking to myself, I think Zimbabweans are nuts. Why would they listen to this pastor? Like, people should go to work. Like, seriously, I think you guys need to get out of your homes and go to work. But it spoke, I think, of the deep kind of desire to do something but have no options. But then finally find something that you can do with a level of safety and in a united fashion, and in a way that kind of helps you begin to build your own courage to be able to speak truth to something so powerful and something so big in a way that is so unprecedented. By saying nothing, you say something.
Totally.
Right? So that succeeded, and immediately, I was advised by some friends to go into hiding, because then there was a warrant out for my arrest from the government after that day. Eventually what they did is they went to my home, and my wife.
By the way,
and my
you have
kids,
a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and one
yes,
expecting.
and one expecting, 5, 3, and one expecting, which is, by the way, the kind of internationally recognized sign to start trouble with a dictator is when you have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, exactly. and a pregnant wife. My wife wanted to kill me. I have to tell you this right now, because people always ask, "What about your wife?" I'm like, "Yep, she was."
She was on the list.
Her and the dictator were ready. They were like, "Well, I will take you out myself." There's a conversation we had that kind of, with maybe not those exact words, but I understood. Even I was thinking to me, what am I doing? Because what they then did is they went to the house and they threatened her and the children whilst I was in hiding. And so at that point, for me, the game changed. I was like, okay, this is not it. This is not worth it. And so I handed myself over, and I was immediately arrested and charged with attempting to overthrow the government.
And so you were in maximum security prison for about a few days.
I was held for 2 nights on that first arrest. And it was a very difficult night. I was interrogated, then I was beaten and tortured whilst I was held. One of the things that they did, I don't share much about it. I've written a little bit of it in the book, but one of the things they did is that they had me sit down on the ground, and they took my shoes off, and they beat the soles of my feet with what's it's almost like a 4x4, and it's something that they do to a lot of people that are kind of arrested on political charges. But it was a very difficult 2 nights in prison. But I have to tell you that what happened afterwards, after that night, when I was going to court after the 2 days, was so unexpected and so amazing that it genuinely did. Sometimes people don't understand it, but it genuinely erased the pain and the anguish of those 2 nights. And what it was that we were getting ready to go to court, and one of the police officers who came to get me said, "Hey, we have to delay about an hour. There's about 200 people gathered at the courts that have come, and they're from your church, and they're singing, and they're, saying they're not leaving until you're released." And I'm like, first of all, there's 40 people in my church.
How far away is it?
Oh, hey?
How far away is your church from the?
I mean, it was within the city. It wasn't, yeah. But I've never been more forthright about having a small church than in that moment. I was like, these are not my people. It's 40 people, in my church. In fact, 4 of those people are from my house, so there's probably about 35, because I was counting.
And right now they're not happy
counting
with me,
the unborn. So. Yeah, I was counting the pregnancy as well. Like that's also one of them, and 5 of them cleaned the venue, so we're down to 20. And people come to church in cycles every 2 weeks, so there's about 10 people in our church. I don't know what you're talking about. But he comes back an hour later again and says, "Hey man, we're sending a riot squad to go and remove the people, because there is now, about 500 people." He comes back an hour later and says there's about 2,000 people. This goes on for 7 hours, and by 7 p.m., I still haven't left the police station, and there's now 10,000 people gathered at the courts. I remember I cried so much, and one of the reasons I cried, excuse me, is because they said these people were scared. They say these people were powerless. But they showed up, Rod. They showed up. They found their courage and they showed up. And for me, the thing is, if you are able to give people some sort of a model, some sort of a way to find their courage, people will take it, right? It's not that people don't want to step up. People just want to. They just need to find a way. Man, and 10,000 people showed up. And it was wild because these people refused to leave, and people were making sandwiches at home to bring for everyone else at the courts. And they were like, "Don't leave until he's released."
And this helped with the release, right? 2 days
Oh,
later.
yes, man. And late into the night, that night, more people were coming. The government decided that they would have to let me go because it was now a security situation nationally, because people were gathering at other courts in other regions of the country as well. So I was released that night, and it was just a beautiful moment. But then I had to escape straight away because we got news from, of all people, a police chaplain actually called one of my friends and said, "Hey, he's getting rearrested in the morning. And so you guys do what you will with that information." So, my wife, bless her heart, she's a braver person than I am, and a lot of people won't understand that. But as pregnant as she was, she packed me a backpack, put my passport in there, and she said, "You need to get out of here. You gotta go."
I thought didn't you all go, or just?
Oh, we didn't go at the same time.
Oh, okay.
We didn't go at the same time. She literally said, "They're coming after you. I can't stand that they will take you away again with what you've been through. So you need to leave now." And I'm standing there, and she's pregnant. The two kids, in fact, they were fast asleep at the time. So, because when I finally got home from court, the kids had gone to bed already. And she literally said, "Listen, you better go. Like you need to go now. You need to leave." So I left, and I was driven across the country, about 6 hours across to a small border, and eventually I was able to escape. It was only 7 days later we were able to move her and the children out of Zimbabwe. And then we rendezvoused in South Africa. There's a whole story again around
Is
their
it in the book
leaving.
as well?
Yeah, it's all in the book. And once there in South Africa, we were not going to be safe because the government was able to start a process with Interpol to issue a red notice to have me extradited from South Africa. But once we got news of that, and it's interesting story behind it is the person who called me to tell me that I was in danger in South Africa, of all people, someone I never thought I would ever speak to, would ever call me, was actually the US ambassador to Zimbabwe. And he called me and he said, "We have it on good record through our own intelligence that if you come back to Zimbabwe, you are going to be assassinated. So, if you want to come back, that's entirely up to you, but I felt it important for you to have that information." He's retired now, and I met him here in the US when we finally got here in the US, and I owe him my life in ways I couldn't express.
But now I understand the crazy part. Then we're like in the epic part. Now you get to the U.S. Your third boy or girl
It's a girl. My third child. She's born here
in the U.S.
in the U.S.
And seems like you're settled, or not settled. Settled is not the right word. Maybe safe. Is
Yes,
a better word?
I mean definitely
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah.
We're here. We're safe. And 2 months after she's born, 3 months actually, 3
May I
months
ask
after
one
she's
question,
born.
just because I'm thinking about it? Like, when you're moving, by the way, from 6 hours driving, you get to South Africa, but your money is like running away from inflation. Like, how do you take money with you? And
You can't.
Yeah.
You
So what
can't.
do you do?
So we left all our money. We left everything, because there's no time for you to. Because when trouble like this starts, there's no time to go to the bank and get your money and then change it into hard currency and then start going. Like you don't get it.
That's a luxury that you just don't have.
No. It doesn't happen like that, right? And then, of course, once you're in trouble with the government, now accessing your bank, even from outside the country, is literally impossible. And Zimbabwean bank accounts, you couldn't access them from outside the country anyway, because Zimbabwe was not connected to any international bank after the crisis that we had. So it was impossible, apart from withdrawing your money from the bank yourself and then finding a street trader to change it into South African rands or US dollars. There's no other way. You're stuck.
Yeah.
So when we arrived here, we had nothing. We completely had nothing. Even though we had some money back in Zimbabwe, we had to leave it. And of course, since 2016, it eventually lost all its value, and kind of went to nothing. But we're here 3 months, and I'm struggling with the concept of having run away. Our movement, the movement we had built, by the way, it had become a citizens' movement, even though that was not the intention. It was predicated on this idea of courage, on this idea of saying we're fed up and we're not afraid. In fact, that was the byline: fed up and not afraid. But here I am now in August of 2016. We've started this movement in April. It's grown to millions of people that have participated in the campaigns and, of course, the shutdown. And here I am, having done the exact opposite of what had grown the movement. And it was a difficult thing for me to deal with, the distance, the incongruency of what I professed and what I had just done, right? And so I said to my wife, "Listen, I can't even sleep right now. Like and not just the incongruency, but also the responsibility of having started something that everyone suddenly finds hope in, and then it's just gone." And so I said to her, "Look, I feel like like I started something in Zimbabwe that bears a lot more responsibility than my personal safety at this point, and I don't say that lightly, right? And I said to her, I feel in my heart personally, and I feel like it's also God's purpose that I should go back to Zimbabwe and continue the work. That's when she said the words, "If you want to die, I will kill you myself." But it was a very difficult moment.
Your daughter's 3 months old.
My daughter is 3 months old. Yeah.
6, 4, 3 months old.
Yeah. It really, one of those asks for which you have there's just no other way of explaining it or explaining the compensation for it. But again, she was gracious. I know that she was in a lot of anguish concerning it. But eventually said, okay, if you feel deeply that way about it, then maybe it's important for you to go. So I left the US and flew back to Zimbabwe. I was arrested immediately on arrival at the airport. I was taken off the plane by the security agents, and I was beaten at the airport. And then this time I was sent to Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison, which is the most notorious prison in Zimbabwe, and was held there for about 3 months. Again, enduring some really, really tough things, which, if you don't mind, I won't go into. But one of the experiences that I will never forget as long as I live, going into that maximum security prison, was on my first day into that prison. I thought I was going to that was the end. Chikurubi houses the most dangerous prisoners of Zimbabwe. It's like the maximum security. And one of the stories, or many of the stories you hear, is how people get abused by prisoners when you go there. And on my first day, I was convinced they were going to beat me, they were going to rape me, there were all sorts of things. I get there, and these 4 guys approach me. And the guy leading them is a pretty tall guy. He stretches his hand out and he says, "Hello, Pastor, we've been expecting you." Now that could mean a lot of things. That could mean a bunch of things. And then he goes on to say, "We heard about what you did last year at the courts, because some of our friends here in prison were there having their cases heard, and they couldn't leave the courts because of the people that were gathered there." And then he goes on to say, "So my friends and I, when we heard you'd come back, we hoped you'd be brought here, because we wanted to pay you back for what you've been doing for our families." I can't tell you how much that threw me off balance. And he says, "You've done so much for our families whilst we're locked up in here, and we want to find a way to help you to endure the time you're going to be in here, because we really see the mission that you have. And it's important that you were stronger when you leave than when you came in here." 4 prisoners. One of them serving a life sentence for murder, another one serving a sentence for armed robbery, and another one for drug peddling. And these guys just become the most amazing citizens I've ever met. For the almost 4 months I was kept in that prison, these 4 men looked after me faithfully. I wish I had brought the picture with me that we showed the last time of what the prison cells look like. And every time I came back from solitary confinement and from the punishment that would be meted out, these 4 guys would have kept food for me. These 4 guys would clean my wounds. These 4 guys would protect me and make sure that I got a chance to rest. And true to their word, by the time I was released on bail after 4 months, I was more excited about the journey ahead than I had been even when we started. To the point that even though I was under house arrest, we broke out of the house to do protests, and I was arrested another 6 times. Another 6 times after that. But those moments for me are worth so much more than any of the pain we suffered. The fact that we were able to campaign even from prison, that we were able to see people continuing the movement even after I had left and then come back and had been arrested, to the point that I couldn't leave the country. They took my passport, they took the title deeds to my mom and dad's house as surety that I would not escape. And so we continued, campaigning. And by the end of 2017, we came across an opportunity to oust the dictator, which was an amazing opportunity. He was having an internal strife with his own party members, and the military was unhappy with him. And so we proposed to march against Robert Mugabe, to finally get on the street and say, we've had enough. And it happened, and we saw millions of people pour into the streets to finally say to Robert Mugabe, we'd had enough. And around about November 21, I think it might have been, Robert Mugabe finally resigned. He was 93 years old at the time. And it was the most amazing moment that we experienced in Zimbabwe. And it would have been great had things gone better after that, but unfortunately, they got worse because the military took over, installed their own person who was next in line after Robert Mugabe. And things got better for just a few months, and then after that, it just fell off the planet. So I was still on bail, still under arrest. We started again kind of protesting against this guy. And we did one more shutdown. My last arrest was after that shutdown in January of 2019. And I was sent back to the maximum security prison again. I fought that battle for 1 year. And at the end of 2019, I finally managed to get my freedom. And it really was an act of God how I managed to get my passport back. And then I immediately jumped on a plane and came back. And when I did come back in 2020, my daughter, who was 3 months old when I left, was now 3 years old. And it's both, a challenging moment, but also an exciting moment, a moment of just being thankful because it could have been worse. I could not have come back because many people who'd walked the same journey as me, perhaps maybe even done more, did not live to see their families. And I got a chance to come back home to my wife and to my children. So that's kind
amazing.
of the story, and yeah.
So a couple of things, and I think we just went 1 hour, and I blinked. I apologize. I mean, I knew I was said like 30 minutes, and then we're gonna go 30 minutes in Q&A. Your story is so amazing. You could hear a pin drop in this room throughout. Maybe like the last few minutes before we open it up for Q&A. So now knowing about a tool like Bitcoin, and you're now being in the States for a number of years, what are things that you think people in this room could learn or value more about Bitcoin in comparison to Zimbabweans? We talked about how in the U.S. it's more on like the investing, store of value type of side, where in your experience it's really about the financial freedom and the freedom tech.
And that's where I was going to go with it. Is that I think the value is in allowing you to genuinely have a sense of freedom and a sense of not being exposed to the whims of people in power, because people in power have different agendas, and sometimes those agendas may not really include us as ordinary people, even though that's what it says, on the campaign trail. It's different when it's being rolled out, and sometimes, despite the best intentions of people in government, things happen that leave people exposed, and so I think there's a sense, for me when I'm here in the U.S. even as I still, kind of see the different things people have access to, there's a sense here that, wow, there's options to be free, to be safe, to be, for you to be able to kind of stand your own ground. And I think that's the beauty of being in a country that allows its citizens to have the freedom to create these things. Creating a tool like Bitcoin in Zimbabwe is almost, there's just no way. The government would never allow it, that they cannot see what you are doing with your money. For them, it's not acceptable. So the fact that here you have a government, or you have a set of laws, you have a constitution that says you have a right to your freedom, you have a right to your privacy, but then that right is actually respected. I've always said to people, where you have freedom, enjoy it to its maximum extent.
You must defend it at all costs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's what, been very fortunate to travel the world a bunch. And every time I come back to the United States, I'm like, I hit the genetic lottery by being like, my family is an amazing family, but also being raised here in all this kind of comfort and such. But Bitcoin just seems like the timing is like almost too perfect right now across the entire global spectrum. So, by the way, can you show of hands, who has $25? Show of hands. Can you raise them a little higher so I can see? It seems like everybody has $25. Go, right? For the most part. I'll lend you $25 in case you don't. Evan put this, now I really understand the title of this book. Crazy, epic, and the courage you had to get back on that plane flight. I may ask you actually right now, that plane flight, how many hours, or like, what was it? It was a direct flight from Boston to
No, I flew to Heathrow, and then from there, onto Zimbabwe.
I'm not even going to ask you what you were thinking on the entire flight.
I can tell you now, I cried the whole way. The whole way, like there was not even, I remember landing in Heathrow and almost turning back. But I couldn't do it. And I literally wept the whole time. The last leg of the flight into Zimbabwe was probably the hardest, except maybe until the very last moment when the decision for me is, okay, I'm here. I can't go back. This is it. So I'm here for it.
It's like a cold plunge.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a cold plunge.
Can you guys give Evan a huge round of applause?
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are too kind. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.